Now, as a matter of fact, you're listening to The Fatboy Show on RX Radio. I do hope you are doing great today. I wish I could say the same for our friends in West Africa, but it looks like that region of the continent, oh my goodness, they just have so many problems, right? Well, as you know, in Niger, recently there was a military coup that saw the democratically elected president being ousted, and the military junta that's been in charge of it has been facing its fair share of challenges. And just this past Sunday, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, threatened the use of force if soldiers do not reinstate former President Bazoum after a one-week ultimatum. And in response, Burkina Faso and Mali, which have seen two coups of their own since 2020, have banded together in opposition to the rest of the 15-nation regional bloc of ECOWAS, saying that they would consider external aggression in Niger as a declaration of war. They certainly are not playing games. So, what's going on in West Africa? We've got several major countries of the region now being headed by military juntas, essentially army men who seized power forcefully because they were discontent with the outcome of an election or how the country was being governed. Now, of course, if you didn't like the person that was elected into power, whether by hook or crook, you're going to be happy that military guys just seized power forcefully, right? But on the other hand, are you not setting a dangerous precedent for the future of your country and for the future of the continent? Because once you validate even just one military coup, you are sending a signal to all those who are watching that, hey, if I have grievances about the current government and I couldn't be bothered to use the political process to replace this president, then I'm just going to gather some friends, go to the bush, and launch a war of rebellion against this government and attempt to overthrow it. And then the cycle continues. You would think now that we are in 2023, as a people, as Africans, that we have long since detached ourselves from that kind of a cycle of violence, that we ought to be moving towards more peaceful transfers of power, and that if your preferred candidate loses, you kind of just accept it and continue to work with your compatriots who may have supported the person that won. After all, it is your country, and the destiny of that country is in your hands. We are not a monolith. We are, in every African nation, it consists of people of different viewpoints, different ethnicities, and different political affiliations. It can't always be your guy that wins. Sometimes your guy loses. And you know what? You just have to bite your lip. Of course, continue to be active and vocal in the political process and hope that in the next election, your guy might stand a chance, or if not, maybe someone else. Or perhaps by then you'd have taken a liking to the person who won and you didn't like before, and you might vote to have that person reelected. I mean, that's just how it's supposed to be. But the last thing you want to do is to validate the notion that, hey, the use of arms is a valid way, a valid means of obtaining power. I just think it takes us to a very, very dark place. It's been that way on this continent from the time of independence, and it doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So speaking of these military coups in West Africa, of course, right now, all eyes are on the president of Burkina Faso, a young man by the name of Ibrahim Traore. He was born in 1988. So right now he's 35 years old. And he's been the interim leader of Burkina Faso since the 30th of September 2022 after a coup d'etat which saw the former president Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba be deposed. And so at this young age of 35, Traoré is currently the youngest serving president in the entire world. And you might have seen videos of him going viral in the past week that showed him attending a series of meetings, or was it one meeting, with the president of Russia. There has been a summit going on in St. Petersburg in which a few African heads of state have been visiting Russia to meet with Putin to discuss, areas of cooperation. And so the president of Burkina Faso was one of the presidents there. And the speeches that he's been giving have just been going viral because he expressed very anti-imperialistic, anti-colonial, and pro-African sentiments.
My generation is asking many questions without getting any answers. We do not understand how Africa, with such wealth and such generous fertile land, with water and sunshine in abundance, is nowadays the poorest continent. Africa is a starving continent, and our leaders are happily traveling around the world begging. The real problem is to see leaders of African countries who do not provide any support to the people fighting imperialism, and who sing the same song as the imperialists. We, the heads of African states, must stop acting as puppets ready to dance whenever the imperialists pull the strings. We must make sure that for the next forum, we must not set foot here without having ensured food self-sufficiency for our nations.
Now, to most of us idealists, this is music to our ears. For a man to say we shall not be ruled by foreigners and outsiders, and the destiny of, the people of Africa will be in our own hands, all this kind of stuff, right? We can all get behind that. But we must not forget at the same time how he captured power, and it was through a military coup. And so this is not a very good thing. Now, a little backstory regarding Traoré. So he was a part of a group of army officers that supported this coup that took place in January of 2022, which brought the patriotic movement for the safeguard and restoration to power. And from March 2022, he was serving as the head of an artillery regiment in a region of the country called Kaya. And so while he was there, he became dissatisfied with the performance with the then interim president, Damiba, because apparently he was not very capable in terms of containing the jihadist insurgency that had been plaguing the nation for years. And so Traoré later claimed that he and other officers had tried to get Damiba to refocus on the rebellion, but then they just eventually opted to overthrow him. Because according to Traoré, Damiba's ambitions were diverting away from what we set out to do. Dissatisfaction about the situation was highest among the younger officers who had fought against the rebels at the front lines. And so they launched their coup in September of 2022, on the 30th of 2022, 30th of September 2022. And at the time, Traoré still held the rank of captain. The operation was carried out with support of what is called the Cobra Unit. I mean, this guy has some serious superhero vibes. If you even see how he carries himself, how he dresses, it's like perhaps he's read one too many comic books, right? In fact, I posted something on Twitter comparing him to one of the characters from the Naruto series. He reminded me of Kakashi Sensei. If you don't know, you'll probably just look it up and find out who he is. The resemblance in presentation and the outfit and even the gloves, quite uncanny, if I may say. So, as president, how has he been faring? Well, President Ibrahim Traore, in February of this year, he expelled the French forces assisting in fighting the local insurgency from Burkina Faso. He subsequently declared that we really want to look at other horizons because we want win-win partnerships. And we are supporting the diversification of Burkina Faso's international partnerships. Okay, quite interesting. He has promised the restoration of democracy in 2024, and he's promising that democratic elections will be held around that time. Yes, he has promised to hold democratic elections in July of 2024. Now, of course, we cynics would say, yeah, we've seen this and heard this so many times before. All across the continent, wherever there's a military takeover, the person that takes over says, okay, well, we shall have elections in the next couple of years. And then one of two things will happen. Either the deadline shall approach and he'll say, well, we're still not ready, or now we are in a state of emergency, so now I am indefinitely in power, or I shall communicate to you at a yet to be determined date that election shall be held. So for now, forget about it. So it's either that or this person will then create his own political party, and using the force of the government, which he now controls, will be able to stifle all opposition activity, control the electoral process, appoint the election authorities, and very easily win an election if he chooses to stand. as a member or as a leader of a political party. I'm not going to name the African country, but you've seen this in many places, right? So that's how it always turns out. These types of people who come forward and say they want to make things better for everyone, and that the previous leaders were terrible and they're here to set things straight, they usually do know better than the people they replace, and quite often they are even worse. So I know we are all enamored by President Traoré. He's youthful, energetic, and by the way, very well spoken. And I saw his speech. He was speaking in French, of course, but he just exuded confidence in the way he was speaking, just flawlessly, without a stammer and without any confusion, without mumbling. He was just making his points. And one of his points that he made at that summit in Russia that I really appreciated was about how can it be that in Africa, we must beg others. We are a rich continent. We've got the resources. We've got the food. So, we need to ascend to, prominence. Basically giving those very anti-colonial and very pro-Pan-African kind of rhetoric, right? That we've all heard a million times before. And I thought I'd just say something about that. This whole thing of, in Africa, we have minerals, we have gold, we have diamonds, we have oil, we have what? So the West must bend towards us rather than the other way around. To that I say there is a tinge of naivete underlying such assumptions. Because you have to understand that the way the world is set up, it's kind of a cartel, right? Or a monopoly, if you want to call it that. Sorry if I'm using the words interchangeably. But essentially, you kind of have to be a part of the club in order to participate in trade. I'd like to take you back to what happened to the nation of Haiti, the island nation of Haiti, who you'll recall had been for many years under French rule, and slaves had been taken there to plant sugar on the massive sugar plantations. And, the French were making a lot of money from sugar, the sugar plantations in Haiti. And then what happened? Okay, so the slaves staged a rebellion. They said, we don't want the French here anymore. And essentially the rebellion in Haiti counts as one of the only times, if not the only time, that an African nation has stood up, or a black nation has stood up and kicked out their European colonizers or oppressors, whatever you want to call them. And so the people of Haiti were now left to govern themselves. And then what happened? They got completely locked out of world trade and global trade. So yes, were they producing all of the sugar? They were. But no one was willing to buy it. And so the result of that was, we look at Haiti today and we see that Haiti is in fact one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. In fact, I believe it is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. And compared to African countries, I'm not sure how well or how poorly they fare, but they're probably not that far ahead of us either. Probably about at the same level as most African countries, if not even below. In other words, the situation in Haiti didn't improve once they regained their independence, even if they had vast resources, natural resources, and in particular a very in-demand cash crop by the way of sugar. They still were not able to build upon that prosperity because they were effectively locked out. And so here in Africa, we might have all of the gold and the zinc and the magnesium and the diamonds and the coffee and the cotton and the oil and all of this stuff. But unless you operate in ways that allow them to accept you into their club, then you're just going to be sitting on that gold and diamonds and all this stuff forever. Think of it this way. Before the Europeans came to Africa to take advantage of these mineral resources, what were we doing with it? What were we as Africans doing with magnesium? What were we doing with diamonds? What were we doing with cobalt? What were we doing with nothing? At best, there were some communities here and there making little useless ornaments with copper or whatever else. But we weren't really harnessing the economic power that would come with trading in these precious commodities and natural resources. We just weren't harnessing that because for the most part there wasn't a demand for it. Who on the African continent was going to buy diamonds? Who on the African continent was going to buy crude oil? Who on the African continent was going to buy zinc and magnesium? It wasn't until the demand from Europe and the Western Hemisphere brought prospectors to Africa to see how these resources can be exploited, and then they decided to therefore colonize our countries so that they can exploit these resources and ship them back to their countries. So if now we are in charge of these nations, in charge ostensibly, right? At least figuratively we are. Okay. We are still at the mercy of the Western nations where the demand for these commodities is highest. If we can't sell our coffee to Europe or to America, who's going to buy it? Nobody. Our domestic economies can't sustain, our coffee industry. And it's not like Kenyans or Tanzanians are going to be buying our coffee. They've got their own coffee that they also want to sell in those European markets. And they also want their commodities to appear on shelves in European and American and Asian supermarkets. So we are still at the mercy of these powers because we rely on their markets for export. Without which all of the gold and the silver and the diamonds and the cotton and the oil we're sitting on is worthless. So for the president of Burkina Faso to sit there and say, oh, well, Africa, we are so rich, we're so powerful, we have all these resources, we shouldn't beg. My friend, you still have to beg. I'm sorry to say this, but you can have all the oil and all the gold in the world, you are still going to beg because they have something that you desperately need. Over which they can exercise leverage, and that is access to their markets. And if you want access to their markets, what are they going to do? One of two things. They're going to compel you to work with them under terms of engagement that are favorable to them. You might have to grant them a license to set up, companies and institutions. Or whatever, set up their own oil rigs if it's oil that they want, or build their own mines to be able to exploit these things. You're going to have to grant them access to your resources for you to find a market for the other resources you want, probably like your agricultural commodities that you want to sell. So either way, you're screwed. Either way, they are in control of your politics. So they're either going to compel you to create favorable terms for them, or they're going to remove you, the president that's giving them a hard time, and then they'll replace you with someone who is going to give them what they want. We are still slaves to the need for access to their markets. And so I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but I'm sorry. I don't think us having all these resources necessarily puts us in a place where we can exercise more leverage in geopolitical affairs. I think what we need to do, if anything, is to sort of create our own. And I know that they're trying to do it, with all these economic zones and trade deals with the neighboring countries, but our markets are still far too small. We desperately need the Western markets. And for as long as we need those markets, they're going to keep calling the shots. So you can sit there in St. Petersburg and give all these speeches about how you wonder how it is that Africa is still begging to this day. Well, among other things, we just don't have the market to sustain ourselves. And until that happens, they are going to keep calling the shots. They will continue to exploit us. They will continue to control us. It could be that he's still young. He's just 35 years old. He doesn't really know the ways of the world. I mean, I like him. He's cool. But in my opinion, a bit idealistic and a bit naive. And I just thought I'd share my thoughts about him and what's currently happening in West Africa in general. Just because you hate colonialism and just because you hate imperialism, it doesn't therefore mean you automatically jump on any dictator that comes along and promises to kick them out for you. Because ultimately, what is the question you must ponder? Is it that you hate, how can I say, is the issue that what's important to you is the color of the skin of your oppressor, in which case you just hate that your oppressor might be white? but you're quite okay by being oppressed by a black leader or black politician. So that for me is the big question that people have to ponder. And this is not an argument for colonialism, but just an argument to say, hey, we got to put things in perspective and place the focus where it's required. Okay, why is it that when we take over our countries, we kick out the colonialists? Our countries tend to fare worse. They are worse governed. There's less infrastructure. Say what you will about the colonialists. Yeah, they'll take your gold and your cotton and coffee and minerals and all that. They'll do that for sure. And that's what people like to say. Oh, they plundered Africa. But as they were plundering Africa, they at least were taking some of that money, a good chunk of that money, and putting it back in the country they were plundering by way of roads, hospitals. In many African countries, the infrastructure that still stands today is what was left behind by the colonialists. You know, the vast railway networks, the road networks, the hospitals, many of the government buildings, public housing, colonialists here in Uganda, just as an example. And yet, while our leaders, ever since our leaders have taken charge, what have they done? Not really anything. They barely use what we generate as a country to build infrastructure. Much of our infrastructure that we build is done under the auspices of foreign aid. You know, the Chinese are going to come and build our hospitals and build our state house and build our national stadiums. The Japanese or the Europeans are the ones who are going to come in and build all of our roads. Right, the U.S. government are the people who are going to fund our entire educational system. So that's the thing. At least in the case of Uganda, while we were being plundered by the British, I don't think they were running around collecting foreign aid to build the Mulago Hospital and Entebbe Airport. They were doing it with the resources that Uganda was generating. But surprisingly, now that we are governing ourselves, we can't seem to do that. I don't know, man. Shall we always be beggars? Apologies for belaboring the point, but this is a very interesting topic, isn't it? And I think it will not end here. We'll have to revisit the issue at a future time and get into it some more. Of course, I'm sure I must have ruffled your feathers a little bit. You might even want to strangle me for these opinions, but I very much would like to hear what you have to say. So feel free to share your thoughts with us here. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can leave your comments below and just let me know what you think about Ibrahim Traore, about all these military coups that are happening in West Africa, the military juntas that are in charge, and the governments of Mali and Burkina Faso who are threatening to view any invasion or any incursion into Niger as an act of war. What do you think about all that? And what do you think about Africa's place in the world and how it can stand tall in the realm of global trade? Tell me what you think. You're listening to The Fatboy Show on RX Radio.